Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. We made it. It's the first Friday at the end of the first full, what should we call it, work week? I guess we can still call it a work week with Donald Trump installed in the presidency. We made it. That's 51 more to go until the end of the first year. We'd be 25% of the way through at that point. Wow. Well, it's a long march, and that's assuming he lasts that long. What's blowing up the internet this morning? Well, a little bit of everything, but of course, it's all circulating around Donald Trump, which is just where he wants it to be, of course. Although I wonder whether he isn't beginning to question the idea that all publicity is good publicity, because he certainly doesn't act like it. Anyway, let's see. Last night we blew up the internet with, I personally did it. I did it myself. I found a photo that I hadn't seen circulated on the on Twitter anyway, or widely on the internet anywhere else. Although you say that, we always are saying things like that. Nobody's covering this, but then we tweet it around, and of course it's a link to an article somewhere. So of course somebody is covering it. I found this photo at the Daily Mail, in case you were wondering, which I know Parlio keeps imploring me, please don't read the Daily Mail. It's horrible. I know, but I look for splashy, crazy coverage here. It's also a somewhat different dynamic of in the UK. I think I would have an easier time avoiding the Daily Mail because somebody else would give me what I need there, of course, and avoiding the tabloid coverage in the country of origin is somehow easier. You get your news elsewhere, but I don't know. There's some camp value to the Daily Mail. Plus, of course, for whatever reason, the Daily Mail, I guess because they enjoy the distance from us here in the United States, and gun attitudes are so different in the UK, I find that the Daily Mail is one of the only outlets that dares to show you the faces of the children that accidentally get shot to death here in the United States. It's not, I wouldn't say rare for a United States outlet to run those pictures, especially if the family provides them. But the Daily Mail is, I guess, aggressively interested in showing people those faces, as I am. I think it's an important part of the story. I don't know why the United States news media tends to shy away from it. I know why they do it. I don't know if that's if it still works as a method of journalism. But anyway, it's out there, and this isn't about them. This is about Donald Trump. I was going to get back to that one. Donald Trump, I took a photo off of their site, a collection of their photos of him making his way to and from Philadelphia yesterday for the Republican congressional retreat taking place there. And one photo in particular struck me as unusual, and it's a picture of him boarding the Marine One helicopter, though I'm not sure whether he's on his way to Philly. That would be here boarding from the White House on his way to Andrews to get on to Air Force One to fly to Philadelphia. I would have thought, by the way, Philadelphia would be reachable easier, perhaps, from Washington, D.C. via Marine One, but I guess not. Although I have flown from Washington to Philadelphia once before. The only time I ever flew between those two cities was when a presidential campaign was paying for it, so I would never have made that run by airplane if it wasn't, if it was up to me. Anyway, the point is, Donald Trump is boarding the Marine One helicopter, and they've got the rotors going, which I guess they're now going to have to, unless he was just caught in a gust of wind. It was very windy yesterday. That could be it. And anyway, he's going to have to issue executive orders not to start the engines and run the rotors until he's on board because, of course, he's got that fantastic mess of a head going on. And it blew his stringy hair all over the place, but it also blew the tails of his suit coat up, exposing his rather sizable backside, which, you know, again, it's not like enormous, like outrageous or anything. He's just, and he's an older guy, and he's not whatever. But he's no spring chicken, certainly, and there's this big butt sticking out there. I know he's not going to like that one very much. It was all a little distracting and led to all kinds of fun for people zooming in on all sorts of things, by the way, including somebody who was insistent that he was wearing elevator shoes. I don't think I could tell from that picture. My eye isn't that fine on the elevator shoes issue. I don't think I would recognize them, but they did look like they had a bit of a lift to the heel, which would be an unusual thing to do for a guy who's 6'2", to put on elevator heels. But then, of course, remember, he was busy claiming to be 6'3", rather than 6'2", so suppose he needs some help with it. Anyway, other people focusing on his hair, other on his suit jacket, others on his butt, asking whether the helicopter made his butt look big, or I asking whether this ass makes my country look dumb. But take from it what you will, but everyone seems to be interested in sharing bits, pieces, or the entirety of that photo. So here we are, underway, looking at Donald Trump's butt, etc., for the morning. And congratulations again on making it to Friday. We'll try and enlighten you the best we can during today's show. Some dumb stuff has happened. And, Karen says the word is ample. Karen S, or Karen A without the N. Her name's Karen D, but the address on Twitter, KareSF. The word I'm looking for here is, yes, ample, quite an ample backside. I also, by the way, found a picture of him walking across, I guess, the White House lawn at some point on his way, I don't either, again, to or from the events of yesterday. And I caught him. It wasn't me. I didn't take the picture. He was caught mid-gait with his, leg lifted in kind of an awkward way, as will always happen. If you take enough pictures of somebody just doing normal things, those freeze frames often look pretty weird. And but it looked like one of the dancers from Riverdance. He had, the back leg was planted firmly, and then the right knee was up. And all right, well, you can look around and find it. I just labeled it Riverdance and let everybody take a look at it for themselves. And among those enjoying that particular tweet, Bill in Portland, Maine, I saw tweet that out also. And in the meantime, I have lost track of Bill's morning tweet, so I'm going to have to go and dive back in and grab it up so that everybody can share in it with us. Daily Kos Radio is live. Kagro X, that's me. I'll tell you 10 minutes into the show. David Waldman is my name. Trump needs a bigger helicopter to get his gigantic ass through the door. That's true. They might need one of those military-style ones with the rotors on the front and back just to kind of get off the ground once he's in. Or maybe they should just put him in a harness and fly him elsewhere. It's not fat-shaming. It's idiot-shaming. Trust me. If you're fat and smart, I love you. You're my favorite kind of person. I share a lot with you. Everyone could stand to lose weight. That's not really the issue. But of course, for a guy who's such an egomaniac, and, by the way, who is convinced that women can't wait to be grabbed by their you-know-whats, I still can't get used to saying it, even though, really, in liberated times, please, I'm such an old-fashioned guy. It still seems wrong to just shout that out, and I think it is. But sometimes you're making a point. But for a guy who thinks women are dying to have him grab them between the legs because, God, he's so dreamy. Plus, he's got $1 bazillion and he's so successful. And man, I heard such great things. Didn't you see that tabloid report 100 years ago that said it was the best sex he/she ever had? I think that was supposed to be Marla Maples' words. But of course, they were given over to the gossip columnist by a guy pretending to be Donald Trump's publicist, but who was really Donald Trump. Okay, there we are. So let's see. What else is blowing things up this morning? Here's a good idea, just from out of the blue. I saw it. I liked it. I saw a good recommendation, too. Nolan Treadway from, is Nolan not any longer with Netroots Nation? The entire Netroots Nation crew that I remember from the early days has kind of transitioned out. After 10 years or so, they all thought, maybe I might like to do something else. Anyway, that's where I know Nolan from, and or chiefly from. I think we were acquainted even before he began working for Netroots Nation. I've been around a long time. I'm very old, and pretty soon my butt will look like that if I ever get on a helicopter. But he was retweeting a message from Jake Beckman. Jake, who are you? Tell us who you are. He's got a blue check mark. It just says human being, so I'm at a loss. What kind of human being is verified and says he's just a human being? One of those guys who's not into credentials, I guess. Do you guys know who Jake Beckman is? There's a cartoon of his face for an avatar, so he must be important. Someone must have drawn that for him. Anyway, I'm terrible with names like that, and I'm more interested, though, in what Jake had to say, of course, which was, he suggested someone should just start running for president, like immediately. Trump wouldn't be able to resist campaigning again, and his agenda would stall. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't help him along on that. And Nolan was saying, I nominate Van Jones for the job. I would go along with that. Just to have somebody pick up the torch and run with it. You could do far worse, certainly. Plus, he's actually quite skilled. Doesn't always hit a home run. I don't know anybody who does. But I don't know. I think he's up to the task. I think he'd take it on. I don't know if he really wants to be president. That's not really the point. I thought it was a good suggestion. I don't know who else would pick it up and run with it. And I don't know where you'd get the money to fund it, but I imagine you could find it. If you found that you were having success derailing Donald Trump, I think it would flow pretty quickly and easily. So my suggestion, someone should take him up on that. And I'm too busy. And as you know, if I were any good at raising money, well, a lot of our problems would be solved. It might be a good time, an opportune moment to remind everybody that Patreon account is up and waiting. We every once in a while get a small trickle of additional donations in, and I thank everybody who has been along for the ride so far. I think it will make it possible to do things like, well, one, eventually give in to the highway robbery from the New York Times and subscribe to their national digital edition. We did it. We managed to make me, I managed to make myself, you managed to make me, shamed me into it, subscribing to the Washington Post, but their $99 price point for a year's worth of the digital edition, as they call it, that did the trick. The $149 price point is sticking in my craw, or people say stick in your craw. That's not really what it is. Stuck in my throat is where I'm having difficulty swallowing it, I guess. What is a craw? Maybe I should be looking that up. Anyway, I don't know. Somehow the extra $49 on the New York Times price tag made me hesitate. But ultimately, I think it's worth doing. I mean, they get a lot of things wrong. They piss me off from time to time, but certainly less often than some other terrible newspapers that I can think of. And they provide such a huge part of the content of the show. I feel like I owe it to them. So I guess probably by the end of the weekend, I'll give in and subscribe. Now that I've hit my 10-article limit, certainly, the time is right for that. But in the meantime, you can help contribute to our upkeep here. Well, at least we've got at least $250 of annual expenses that I've just named for you, just subscribing to the Washington Post and New York Times. In addition, of course, upkeep of equipment. One of these days, this MacBook Pro is going to give out on us. I'm on my second microphone. My earphones are pretty much falling apart, although that's largely a function of the fact that the Bose has made it extraordinarily difficult, at least from my perspective, to get the new the pads onto the earphones. I bought some replacements and I can't get them on there. So anyway, I look like it looks like everything's falling apart in here. And ultimately, I don't spend all day on it, thankfully, because I've got the help of Scott Anderson taking the bulk of the work off of my plate. I say the bulk of the work because somehow, I guess the satisfaction of speaking to all of you each morning and talking with all my friends on the phone in the morning makes this seem a lot less like work. to put this show together. Anyway, the point is, I have kids that need to eat and go to college one of these days, and, that's not making it happen. And one of these days, I guess, the threat from the rest of the family, you're going to have to make this either pay like a job or find another one, will come call. There'll be a margin call on that. And, if you think it's important to be able to come here and gather your wits about you in the morning or whenever you listen to the podcast just to make it through the Trump presidency, although a lot of you felt that way even when we thought it was going to be a Hillary Clinton presidency, then maybe you can find a way to say, for 25 cents a day or so, I can put $5 in the coffers each month or perhaps contribute more and keep this show up and running. It's even in competition with the offer of the new Senate prodding project that we've been kind of hinting at, talking about a little bit over at the main flagship empire of Daily Kos. And, if that's something that they want to see done full time, and I were to weigh the payment that could come behind the project like that versus the radio, well, if my family has anything to do with it, they may say, if you can't do both, you might have to choose the other one. I wish that were not so stark a choice, I guess is what I'm saying, because I'm a terrible fundraiser. This is why I'm not going to be running for president. I just simply can't say to you, I need your help to make this thing work and to make this into a real sustainable job that my family won't insist I give up at some point, because when college tuition bills come due, I have to say, well, I really like doing this, or I can say, not only do I like doing this, but it's actually paying the bills. And yeah, we can afford things like that. And we've had some good response. On Patreon, we have some 61 folks signed up. But then on the other hand, I have been noticing an uptick in our Libsyn download numbers. There are well over 3,000 and on our way to 4,000 daily. And yesterday we had a tremendous day, nearly 5,000 people downloading the show yesterday. So we're beginning to spike up, and that makes some sense in the Trump era. But with 5,000, if that were sustainable, 5,000 people downloading the show daily, and 61 of them saying, I will take some part in its sustenance, that ain't going to work. And as much fun as it is to see the Patreon numbers tick up, we are, I think, talking about in the neighborhood of $425 each month, which doesn't really, pay for the sustenance of something like this. But we do it because we love it, and there is some additional stipend from Daily Kos, because after all, it is Daily Kos Radio. But without revealing too much, I can say it doesn't make a tremendous amount of difference in terms of turning this into a sustainable, full-time sort of thing. And certainly it certainly doesn't afford us the ability to hire anybody to help us with it, or even contribute, I don't think, substantially to the upkeep of Scott, who volunteers his time. I like to throw some of that money his way, but, he's a professional. He could do better elsewhere, but he likes to listen to the show too. All right. Somebody designed me a better fundraising program than me walking around in circles sounding dumb, and then we'll be fine. Rebecca Romans reminds everybody signing up with Patreon is easy and painless. You should try it. I agree, and it's easy enough to find, too. In case you are just sort of becoming aware of it, I link to the Patreon site each day, of course, every time we put up the afternoon summary of what we've done during the show, and anytime we put that into the midday or evening open threads. But in case you're not familiar with those and you just now said, just tell me where to go and I'll go there, you can find them at patreon.com, patreon.com/KagroX, KAGROX. Easy enough to find. You'll find my page there, and making the contributions is simple and easy too. Credit card information? Yeah, they'll need it. Can you make it happen? Well, it's up to you. I know nobody likes signing up with a new service, But every once in a while you have to do it. If I have to pay for the New York Times and the Washington Post and give them my credit cards, and they're more likely to lose control of that information, I think, well, if it was up to me, I'd keep yours secret, of course. Up to Patreon, well, I don't know. I think they've done a pretty good job so far. Anyway, time to move on to the news. That's typically what we do here, rather than sit around and beg for money. So let's make it worth it. Let's take a look. So many horrible things happening. Of course, it's difficult to keep up with them all. And I do want to get off of the well-traveled path of the latest outrage news, but sometimes they require a little bit of a comment. Let me see. In terms of roundup for this morning, let's see if we can do this pretty quickly. Good point to bring up this morning because Donald Trump is tweeting about it, and as you know, the whole world is forced to pay attention to everything he tweets. I think this one has auto-playing video, so let me see if I can head it off at the pass. But I saw it tweeted, I think Benji Sarlin pointed this one out and tweeted out this in response to Donald Trump's tweet that, yes, he's serious about pursuing this stupid idea of 3 to 5 million illegal votes being cast, and that he is going to see to it that an investigation finds the real truth and that something be done about it, which creates all sorts of complicated issues about the federal government intervening in what is largely a state and even county-controlled process. The voter rolls, they're going to have Mike Pence make a thorough review of all the voter rolls everywhere in America, which the vice president might actually have time to take care of. But because small government, Washington, D.C. is going to come into every county in America and take a look around and look for funny-looking last names or things that sound like they might be brown and kick those people off the voting rolls and say you no longer have a stake in the running of our country. By the way, this might not be a bad time to, well, I don't know if our public officials ought to do it, but it might not be a bad time for theoreticians, let's say, like us here, to say, why don't we allow permanent residents to vote? I understand, traditionally the basis is, well, if you're really committed to living here, you'll become a citizen. But what's the political science basis for telling people who are here on a permanent enough basis that basically they've dedicated themselves to having to follow the law of this country? Right? I mean, they don't claim any kind of diplomatic immunity, certainly. Bernhard Langer, permanent resident, not a citizen, certainly, I guess if you ask him, would say, yeah, by remaining here, remaining anywhere, but here in particular, this is where he's chosen, I opt into the system. The laws that govern this country govern me. Why shouldn't I have a say in that? Certainly they pay taxes here. Why not? If there's no taxation without representation, then give the representation. I understand that there's other things that weigh into the decision making, and it's certainly an easy and jingoistic thing to say, well, if you don't care enough to become a citizen, why should I give you a vote? And isn't that part of what makes a citizen is the right to vote? Well, we made it that way. That's not really an acceptable excuse to say, well, that's part of the definition. We could certainly redefine it to say if you're here and you live under the laws and you pay the taxes, then I think you should have a say in how decisions are made. I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. Anyway, Trump now insisting, what's the nature of his, I can't remember the text of his tweet. And I suppose we could look around. It's easy enough to find whatever it is that Donald Trump said last, but he was saying in particular that he wanted to wait for the results of a study by VoteStand before making any decisions. And it turns out VoteStand is one, run by one of the, Alex Jones universe crackpots, apparently a guy by the name of Greg Phillips. And two, there's no substance to it. There's nothing under the hood. Here's the thing that we got directed to from Pundit Fact, which is, I guess, a little bit like PolitiFact. It might even be one of their other publications. I don't know. I never noticed this before. But anyway, fact check. Did 3 million undocumented immigrants vote in this year's election? Obviously, we know that the answer is no. But or after here is Greg Phillips, and who is this guy, and what's vote stand? Well, let's see. At some point, Alex Jones also tweeted about this and about this guy, or I guess shared it maybe via Facebook here. 3 million votes in the U.S. presidential election were cast by illegal aliens, according to Greg Phillips of the votefraud.org organization. See, he bought himself a domain that looked like he might be an expert of some kind worth listening to, but it turns out he might just be a nut. Other websites have also touted the report, including that Milo guy, The New American, and Freedom Daily. Those don't sound very good, do they? So is there any truth to it? Well, we don't know for absolute certain, but the report is actually a tweet. That's, I think, one of the more important things about it. Greg Phillips and his report. I want to wait for the vote stand report. All it was, one tweet. A tweet by a random guy. And we have the President of the United States saying, we got to have an investigation. I'm going to spend my vice president's whole life on investigating. One tweet. What if anybody spent 10 minutes about one of my tweets? It would be a huge loss in productivity. The report is actually a tweet, and the person who authored the tweet won't explain how he arrived at his figure. If that isn't reason enough to be skeptical, independent experts and historical analyses suggest it's highly suspect. In other words, don't buy it. Where is this report? As evidence of its claim, InfoWars headline refers to a report from votefraud.org and tweets from Greg Phillips, whose Twitter profile says he's the founder of Vote Stand, a voter fraud reporting app. There is no report from votefraud.org, however, and Phillips told PolitiFact he is not affiliated with that website. The information comes from tweets made by Phillips on November 11th and November 13th, and here they are. They've embedded them. What do they say? And where does Greg Phillips tweet? He's at the address at Jump Vote, which has never been mentioned in any of this. Just there it is, Jump Vote. Let's see. One, we have verified more than 3 million votes cast by non-citizens. We are joining at True the Vote, remember them, to initiate legal action. Hashtag unrigged. And then finally, completed analysis of database of 180 million voter registrations. Number of non-citizens votes exceeds 3 million. Consulting legal team. That's the sum total of the quote-unquote vote stand study. There's no study. It's a dude with a baseball cap named Greg, nothing wrong with that, of course, who says, I don't know, I completed a database analysis of 180 million voter registrations. How do we know that? Well, who cares? He didn't. Doesn't make a difference. 3 million, though, by the way, was a number thrown out, or is in the neighborhood of the number thrown out by, what's his name? Chris Kobach, the Kansas Secretary of State, or is he Attorney General? I think he's Attorney General. And he's been close to the Trump campaign. And his methodology, the best I understand his explanation of it, and supposedly he's not a total idiot, like, actually went to a nice upper crust school. I think Harvard, right? And he's certainly better spoken than some of the idiots in this who operate in this atmosphere and in this particular vertical, I guess we could call it, right? It is a cottage industry after all. And his version was that I think he checked on the voter rolls in some of the counties in Kansas and got a number of people who were non-citizens who somehow had made it onto the voter rolls. And then he basically extrapolated, well, X number of people live in this county, and then nationally, X number of people are registered to vote. So if non-residents or non-citizens are registered nationally in all whatever bazillion number of counties we have, at the same rate that they are in one or two particular counties in Kansas, well, then in that case, there would be 3 million nationwide. Of course, if any of the counties did a better job at filtering their voter rolls and actively either making it impossible for or double checking or doing any of the work that they're supposed to do to make sure that their voter rolls don't have any non-citizens on them. If anybody did a better job anywhere along the line, then his number's wrong. And if, let's say, lots of counties did a better job than this particular county in Kansas, then there's probably far fewer than 3 million. And, of course, we have no information about whether any of those people who are on the rolls actually showed up to vote. And I think it was the case that none of them had, even in Kansas. So, I don't know. Sounds pretty suspect to me. We should dig that one up because now I'm speaking without a link in front of me, and that's always dangerous. So, back to this PolitiFact/Pundit Fact. I guess it must, in fact, be a publication of PolitiFact because that's the URL here, politifact.com/punditfact. Phillips would not provide any additional information when asked by PolitiFact. Why didn't PunditFact ask them? I don't know. He says he has chosen not to release more information because he's still working on analyzing the data and verifying its accuracy. Phillips would also not say what the data is or where it came from or what methodology he used, which in the science world is, yeah, right, get out of here. Phillips said he would release the information publicly once he's finally finished, and the president is waiting on this guy. The president's mentally ill. He's a dumb baby, everybody. And even Chris Cillizza agrees. We'll get to that. According to his page on LinkedIn, Phillips is a former finance director of the Alabama Republican Party, so trust him immediately. He also served as executive director of the Mississippi Republican Party. Make up your mind, dude. You're registered in 2 states. Arrest that guy. Voter fraud. He might have lived in one and then the other, but so did everybody else who's registered in 2 states. I don't know. I say throw him in jail. That's probably the best course of action. He was executive director of the Mississippi Republican Party and was managing director of a super PAC that supported Newt Gingrich's 2012 campaign for president, so he's definitely dumb. Plenty of reasons to be skeptical, the article continues. While we have no idea how Phillips arrived at his claim that 3 million non-citizens voted, people who have made similar claims in the past, oh good, maybe they'll get to Kobach, have cited a 2014 report that claimed 6.4% of non-citizens voted in 2008. Okay. And 2.2% of non-citizens voted in 2010 midterm congressional elections. That report was based on data from a Harvard survey of people. That's what it says. A Harvard survey of people. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Harvard surveying, like, say, llamas or, ground squirrels? No. Of course it's a Harvard survey of people. All right. Moving on. But the data was flawed. Because they were talking to people, which created flaws in the subsequent report. How flawed? I don't know. You can read about it here in another PolitiFact article, herein linked. The authors of the survey say a small percentage of respondents who are citizens, this is a big flaw, accidentally misidentified themselves as non-citizens in the survey. Anything can happen if you talk to enough people. That's true. This is because the respondents didn't read the question carefully and accidentally selected the wrong response to the question. How do researchers know this? One of the authors of the survey, Brian Schaffner, said people changed their answers later when they were asked about their citizenship. When we took out people who changed their answer on the citizenship question and only look at the people who answered consistently that they were non-citizens, we found no reported non-citizens who voted, Schaffner told PolitiFact. Other researchers contradict Phillips's tweets. News 21. A national investigative reporting project funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, if any of that means anything to you, found just 56 cases of non-citizens voting between 2000 and 2011. That's not a lot of non-citizens voting over the span of 10 or 11 years. Probably 10. That span suggests to me that it's, okay, late 2000 and in early 2011. Okay. A report by the liberal Brennan Center for Justice at New York University's School of Law found that most cases of non-citizen voting was accidental. I was just cleaning my ballot when it accidentally went off, right? Although there are a few recorded examples in which non-citizens have apparently registered or voted, investigators have concluded that they were not likely aware that doing so was improper, reads the 2007 report. And why is that, by the way? I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's not necessarily intuitive that people who are permanent residents but not citizens and who pay taxes and who are involved in this community shouldn't be able to vote. It's something we've come up with. It's something a lot of countries likewise have as part of the rule. I don't know if there is any country anywhere that lets non-citizens vote, but it's a kind of an artificial construct, and maybe it just didn't occur to them as a particularly sensible one. States that have tried to purge non-citizens from voter rolls, meanwhile, have found even government data lacking. In 2012, Florida Governor Rick Scott's administration started an effort trying to crack down on non-citizens voting by comparing driver's license data against voter rolls. Through this process, the Florida Department of State created a list of 182,000 potential non-citizens that had voted. That number was whittled down to 2,700. Then to about 200 before the purge was stopped amid criticism that the data was flawed given the number of false positives, including a Brooklyn-born World War II vet. So from 182,000, they got down to 200. Give me a list. How many potential non-citizens have voted? 182,000. Okay, you're off by 181,800. Now, should we go ahead and purge this list of 200 that's left? And I guess I don't know. At that point, I might have said, well, okay, if they're still on the list at that point, maybe it's a stronger indication and we should look into it individually. But then I think the scientists step in and say, if you start with 182,000 and you figured out that you've made enough mistakes to purge 181,800 from your purge list, maybe your data is crap. Good point. Ultimately, only 85 people were removed from the voting rolls. State officials began to pursue a second attempt at a purge in advance of the 2014 election, but then abandoned that effort too. So it's even worse than it looked. They got it down to 200, which was a ridiculous embarrassment, and then it ended up in the end being less than half of that. Meanwhile, of course, no shortage of headlines, I'm sure, generated over the claim that 182,000 potentially had voted illegally. In fact, everybody in America potentially voted illegally. It's just not actually true that any of them did. Richard Hasen, Hasen, an election law expert at University of California, Irvine, I think we've actually called his name before, called Phillips's claim fake news. There is no credible evidence I've seen to show a large number of non-citizens voting in the U.S. elections anywhere. The idea that 3 million non-citizens could have illegally voted in our elections without being detected is obscenely ludicrous. And then the ruling of PolitiFact/PunditFact reports claim 3 million illegal aliens cast votes in this year's election. The article points back to tweets from Greg Phillips, who has worked for the Republican Party and has a voter fraud reporting app. But Phillips won't provide any evidence to support his claim, which happens to be undermined by publicly available information. If he does release a more detailed report, they'll consider that information, but for now, the claim is inaccurate. We rate it false. I rate it ridiculously false, but there you have it. Okay, so what else do we want to round up today? There's an awful lot, and probably a worthwhile exercise would be for me to scroll back in my own Twitter feed to remind myself what was so damn interesting that I stayed up all night tweeting things and sharing articles with you guys over the past 24 hours since we ran our own show. However, rather than do it that way, let me check in and round up any other comments. Here's a nice one from Chris Fry. See, back to the fundraising. The $20, thank you very much, per month that I pay to David is so much better than any money I would need to pay to a shrink during this awful period. Hashtag pay David. There you go. It's a hell of a hashtag. Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks very much to all of you. And one of these days, there aren't that many, so I could just sit down and call you out one by one. by name and say thanks so very much. And I really ought to think, I mean, maybe a premium would do it too. Patreon normally you're supposed to offer up some sort of reward or premium, or you connect continuing support to some sort of exclusive benefit. But I don't know, that seems sort of undaily coast-ish, I guess. But a nice premium. If somebody designed up a nice T-shirt or something, and also said, press this button to make it happen. Even if it was, I also need to send some money somewhere to pay somebody to make the damn thing, that would be easy to do. If it's give up the other time you have in your life to go design a T-shirt and work with a vendor and then get a headache because this one or that one ran out of supplies of American-made T-shirts, etc., and the color doesn't match what you were supposed to have, and they don't have the sizing right. Wow, not looking forward to that. But I guess if you're going to grow the business, it's going to have headaches coming with it. All right, speaking of headaches, I'm giving myself a headache delaying my delving into Pocket. There are so many stories that I've stacked up. Maybe I'll just get away from the immediate news of the day and get back to the things that I've been saving in Pocket that I really thought required some additional time, and things I always wanted to include in a day's roundup that I just couldn't make happen. All right, one last distraction. I mentioned to you Chris Cillizza taking up my phrasing. Oh, not my phrasing, but allowing himself to use phrasing in a headline that closely, though I think coincidentally, mirrors language I've been using. You've been seeing me tweet over and over, the president is a dumb baby. I mean, frequently enough that I actually have to change the phrasing of it from time to time because Twitter says you can't just send that same damn thing again. But he is. He's a dumb baby. And I know a lot of people out there probably thought I was kidding or just being hyperbolic. Those of you who are close listeners to the show know exactly what I'm talking about. But I didn't expect anybody else to take that up as a headline, but I'm pleased that this one is there. It's Chris Cillizza in the Fix today, and it's one of Cillizza's things, not one of the other Fix staffers writing this. Again, I don't know who's responsible for the headline, but it is, the leaks coming out of the Trump White House cast the president as a clueless child, which is almost all the way home on that one. Dumb baby. I mean, I'm being blunt for a reason. But clueless child is a hell of a thing to put in a headline in the Washington Post about Donald Trump. We could, in fact, read all about those leaks. And it's interesting stuff, but I don't know if it tells you a great deal more than you already knew. But I recommend, maybe for the first time, taking a look at something that Chris himself has put out there. I don't hate Chris Cillizza. I just don't, whatever. He's playing a different game. How about that? To be fair to him, than I am. And there are a couple of other people on the roster over at the Fix that are playing games that are a little closer to where we are. So, okay, he's not one of my top favorites. But I don't block him. I don't mute him. He's not that bad. All right. One other thing that I want to bring to your attention, and perhaps we'll return to, perhaps not, maybe next week, maybe Armando wants to talk about it a little bit, something like that, but we spent some time on the executive orders yesterday, plus earlier talking to Armando about it. This is a new angle on it. BuzzFeed has this one, and was it Chris Geidner's piece? I better double check. He's the one who I think tweeted it and brought it to my attention. Yeah, it is his piece. And he's one of their best, if you ask me. Okay, what's it about? The Trump administration's day one moves, the executive orders, etc., the things that weren't executive orders that they said were executive orders, all the rest. The moves were copied from Mitt Romney's playbook. Subtitle here, how the most traditional of Republican planning efforts is helping a radical new presidency get started. And let me just give you the lead up here to give you a sense of what they're talking about. When White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer was asked Wednesday about a potential executive order that would revive Bush-era detention and interrogation policies, he flatly denied any knowledge of its existence, saying it was, quote, not a White House document. Spicer added, I have no idea where it came from, but the document is. one of more than 4 dozen potential executive orders prepared for a would-be President Mitt Romney during his unsuccessful 2012 presidential campaign. BuzzFeed News has learned several of these documents appear to have been used by the Trump administration in the president's first week in office. Senior policy and legal advisors to Romney prepared the cache of memos and orders, a menu of options for a, quote, possible presidential directives, in early September 2012, according to a source familiar with the project who shared them with BuzzFeed News, as well as metadata associated with the documents. Former Utah Governor Mike Leavitt, who led Romney's transition planning efforts, told BuzzFeed News that the documents were a part of extensive transition planning aimed at creating executive order drafts prepared on various subjects related to commitments Romney made during the campaign. He noted that they represented an early part of the planning process for the transition, and that given the fact that Romney lost and the transition planning never became an actual presidential transition, Romney himself never reviewed the proposals. Among the cache was a series of actions denoted as being, quote, day one priorities for a President Romney, although Leavitt cautioned against reading too much into those priority assertions, given the early stage of planning they represented. Among the day one actions, however, was one aimed at, quote, minimizing the economic burden of Obamacare pending repeal, unquote. Hours into Trump's presidency, he signed his first executive order titled, quote, minimizing the economic burden of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act pending repeal, unquote. He swapped Obamacare for the actual title of the bill, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. That's it. The Trump orders appeared to be an updated, edited version of the Romney document. Notably, however, the Romney draft proposal called for, quote, the prompt and complete repeal, unquote, of the ACA, whereas the Trump executive order simply calls for the prompt repeal of the ACA. And they've got them here side by side. And, the lead paragraphs tell the story. It's pretty much, in other words, cut and paste job from the Romney transition. He didn't even do his own homework on his own day one, first hours of the presidency stuff. The guy has got nothing. Literally nothing. Okay. So I'll leave the rest of it there for you to read. I just wanted to kind of give you the gist of that. There was also, that reminds me of something I saw, another great tweet that I retweeted. Well, you know what? I do want to just hit a couple more of those before we dive into the long read stories. One, J.J. McNabb, who was such a great source following the Malheur wildlife refuge occupation, etc., just tweeting the notion that Alex Jones, again, we call his name from InfoWars, Alex Jones says he's been offered White House press credentials. Meanwhile, the White House denies it, says it's not true. She says, what's sad is that I have no idea which one is lying. That is rather astonishing, isn't it? All right. Let's see. Other things that I thought were impressive in terms of quick hits from tweets. Oh, and another story that I'll have to look at as well. My goodness, there's an awful lot of things here. There's a gun fail note for you. I actually had a couple of interesting gun fail stories. We'll see if we can hit those or not in our roundup. But a Trump-related gun fail story. This one from the Wall Street Journal. Whereas, I usually don't go. But we reported this, I think, when it happened. But just a reminder to connect it to what's happening today. White House security advisor facing gun charge in Virginia. You might remember when, as the subtitle reads, former Breitbart editor Sebastian Gorka was stopped at Reagan National Airport with a gun in his carry-on, right? But remember now, he's not just a Breitbart editor. Now he's someone that the Trump White House is trying to bring on board as a senior advisor inside the White House. One of President Donald Trump's choices for senior position in the White House is beginning work while facing a criminal charge after he allegedly tried to bring a handgun onto an airliner last year, court records show. So how seriously does the Donald Trump administration take the the laws against trying to sneak handguns onto airplanes. Not very, if you are one of theirs. After all, he's only trying to exercise his Second Amendment rights. Sebastian Gorka, a national security terrorism analyst, was stopped at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport in Virginia last January by an officer with the U.S. Transportation Security Administration who detected a 9mm caliber handgun using X-ray equipment as it passed on a conveyor belt. The officer alerted airport police, who confiscated the gun and cited Mr. Gorka on a state weapons charge, according to a TSA statement. There's more, of course, and you can catch up on all of it by reading, but just to remind you, he's a terrorism analyst and he was caught violating anti-terrorism laws. Just pointing that one out. Okay. A White House official, by the way, said Mr. Gorka is working for senior White House advisor Steve Bannon directly. So how do you like that? You can even work there under current indictment. That's nice. He's a forgiving guy, our president. Okay. What else have we for you? Let's see. Other review of the tweets. There was one I wanted to scan back and find. Just in terms of, I thought it did a really good job summing up what, what's wrong with our president, etc. Let's see. If I can find this one. I think I tweeted it out last night. I shouldn't have to go too far back here. But boy, there's a lot of people making some great points out there. Here we are. Henry Tudor, one of those fun joke accounts who tweets as King Henry VIII, but it's without any vowels in case you're actually trying to find it. So KNGHNRYVIII, Roman numerals. King Henry VIII. What people want in a ruler. First, a loud voice. Scary eyes, has an air of danger and WTF, get it? And this one I thought really hit the nail on the head. His feelings are his ideas. And then lastly, might literally explode. Good bullet points I found, but that really hit it on the head. I thought his feelings are his ideas. And I guess before I jump off of my own tweet stream here, I will point out the work of Tom Bonnier, Bonier. Tom is lists here as the CEO of Target Smart, and he has a question about the many people who are registered in 2 states and screaming about other people being voter fraud. Steve Ducey of, I guess, Fox and Friends, is that his show? Care to explain how someone with your full name and birth date voted in both the Florida and New Jersey primary elections last year? How about that? Not only on the rolls in 2 states, but actually cast a vote that way. Now, could it be that there are 2 Steve Duceys that share the same spelling of the name, the full name, middle name included, I guess, and birth date? And, it just so happens that Steve Ducey does own property in both of those states. Well, I wonder whether there was any kind of an answer to that one. I'm not certain that there was. There's much more, of course, but I keep threatening to do this. I'm going to go now over to Pocket and try and scroll past everything else and not to get distracted. I will note along the way what I see so I can just remind you. I guess we can just tick those off. I did see this. You probably did too. You probably already read the stories about, for instance, Trump personally calling the National Park Service director to pressure them to find better photographs to prove that his inauguration crowd was larger than the other photos, I guess, would suggest it was. Rather surprising. And also a report from The Hill that Trump says McConnell should nix the filibuster if Democrats block his Supreme Court nominee. We'll have to discuss that at some point. I have mixed feelings about it, of course. I hate losing, but on the other hand, filibuster kind of sucks. But on the other hand, Armando's point about the filibuster being appropriate for lifetime appointments is out there too. I don't know. Anyway, I guess overarching it all is I was pretty sure the Republicans were going to do this anyway, so in the long run, we got a good number of judges placed in the federal judiciary where they can do an awful lot of good in exchange for this, and we always knew the Republicans would wipe it out when it became necessary for them to. So at least we got our benefits in along the way. Other news of note, the reports of the entire State Department top management team abruptly stepping down, as it was reported in the earlier part of last evening. And then by the end of the evening, it was clear that they had, in fact, had all of the pro forma January 20th resignation letters, which for a team like this are often just held until they have replacements ready, were finally accepted. It was, in other words, the Trump team sweeping them out and saying, you all got to go. So I think what somebody called one of the largest losses of institutional memory the State Department has ever suffered, just as they are poised to get a Secretary of State with no governmental experience whatsoever. So these are the people that know how to run the department. So good luck, I guess, to Rex Tillerson doing it yourself. Let's see. What else? Some other very interesting articles, certainly. But I need to skip down. I got to get all the way down to... now, let's see. Which ones do I want to add up to make this segment here? I told you that there were some more interesting tech angles to figuring out what the Russians might be up to, what the insiders in the Trump campaign might be up to, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and this one I've got to add together here. I should do this. This is where we need a producer for these things. Give me a folder full of all these articles and just hand it over. Okay, let's see. Where is our first one? Okay, well, let's see. I got my follow-up piece here, but I know there was an earlier one making the same point, which I really thought we should perhaps read first, and yet it is not immediately apparent to me. Okay. Okay, well, maybe there's this one here. I don't know if we can get in that, and dang. There's I guess such a huge flood of news that it's just become very difficult to... and here's part of the problem, too. Some of these things are not properly labeled. All right, here we go. I think I found my beginning here. And this is something that was also requested along the way. I think I mentioned the other day, Ballerina X saying, when are we going to talk about Cambridge Analytica? And I forget exactly what we had been talking about when the request was made, but maybe it'll come flooding back to me as we read this. Justin Hendricks is the person responsible for this tweet that came to my attention. Justin Hendricks lists, he's got that blue check mark, so he's important. Brooklyn, that's what it says in his profile, Emerging Media and Technology, NYC Media Lab, formerly at The Economist. Okay, just to give you, I guess, some context. But he started what I guess was a tweet storm, and I caught wind of the first one here. The Trump campaign used Cambridge Analytica to harvest data from Facebook and join with sources such as Experian. And it's linking to a New York Times piece here, and let's see if we can't bring that one up. Oh, yes. Okay, so I have that one marked for later reading as well. Here's the deal. I guess when we were talking about, now I can't even remember what we were doing earlier this week that made me say this was such a necessary piece, but I'm positive that it is, so I'll go ahead with it. And he's got a clip here from this larger New York Times piece, which I've got here to share, but let me run down his tweet storm first, and we'll get the gist of his overarching story here. His next entry, Steve Bannon credited this effort as the reason he joined the campaign and thought they could win. Remember, he joined Cambridge Analytica's board. This according to Bloomberg News. Maybe I should just read you the excerpts from the articles that he includes. Maybe that's the more efficient way of doing it. Okay, so first, the Trump campaign used Cambridge Analytica to harvest data. In this election, the New York Times reports, dark posts were used to try to suppress the African American vote. Do you remember what that was all about? That you can steer the distribution of your Facebook posts. You can target them not for public consumption, but only for certain demographics, I guess. target things at them, which was, I guess, originally meant to be something like, well, if you want to advertise to the African American community, we can target that specifically and let you hit them specifically and exclusively. But I guess one of the things you can do with that is, instead of selling them products that you think for some reason appeal exclusively to African Americans, you can also send them Facebook posts that purport, say, to be from fellow African Americans, telling them, I've just discovered the truth about something that Hillary Clinton doesn't want you to hear, and it is that she is a virulent racist, and here's the proof. And then you just attach fake news to it, and white people don't end up seeing it because it's not available to them. And it only leaks out if somebody says, holy cow, white people, is this true? So in this election, dark posts were used to try to suppress the African American vote. According to Bloomberg, this in the New York Times, the Trump campaign sent ads reminding certain selected black voters of Hillary Clinton's infamous super predator line. It targeted Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood with messages about the Clinton Foundation's troubles in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. Federal Election Commission rules are unclear when it comes to Facebook posts, but even if they do apply and the facts are skewed and the dog whistles loud, the already weakening power of social opprobrium is gone when no one else sees the ad you see. And no one else sees, I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message. Entry number 2 in our tweet storm from Justin Hendricks. Stephen Bannon credited this effort as the reason he joined the campaign and thought it could win. It says, and could win. I put in the thought it could win. He joined Cambridge Analytica's board. And by the way, God, I only wish I were in position to say something like, I like what they're doing. I think I'll join the board of that. How do you get, that's the place I need to be. All right. Anyway, Bloomberg's piece reads, the excerpt, regardless of whether this works or backfires, setting back GOP efforts to attract women and minorities even further, Trump won't come away from the presidential election empty-handed. Although his operation lags previous campaigns in many areas, its ground game, television ad buys, money raised from large donors, it excelled at one thing, building an audience. Powered by Project Alamo and data supplied by the RNC and Cambridge Analytica, his team is spending $70 million a month, much of it to cultivate a universe of millions of fervent Trump supporters, many of them reached through Facebook. By Election Day, the campaign expects to have captured 12 million to 14 million email addresses and contact information, including credit card numbers, for 2.5 million small dollar donors, who together will have ponied up almost $275 million. I wouldn't have come aboard, even for Trump, if I hadn't known they were building this massive Facebook data engine, says Bannon. Facebook is what propelled Breitbart to a massive audience. We know its power. Let me check in here, by the way, and see whether I have any other comments that kind of guide me back to, because I feel like I skipped a step here. Well, I've skipped 2 through 9 in explaining why I jumped back to Cambridge Analytica, and on the fly, I'm having difficulty recalling it. But maybe Ballerina X, if you're listening, can you remind me why you asked when I was going to connect? Was it who was it? We were asking whether a certain person had connections to Cambridge Analytica, and I said I haven't been able to put my finger on connections for that person, but Cambridge Analytica is a strong storyline. Where can I find your, you must have stuck that in the KITM hashtag column, and I'll bet with just a minute's worth of scrolling, if you'll bear with me, I can find that tweet and then find the named person and then remember my connection, and then I'd feel so much better about reading you all. I know that you're all able to make the connection to this thing, but I feel like I want to fill in the blanks, and who knows what else will occur to me if I can figure it out. Here we are. Will someone please check for Pompeo connections to Cambridge Analytica? Ah, okay. So we brought, that came up then originally in the context of reading about Pompeo's nomination and confirmation as director of the CIA. Now, thank you very much. Okay, that's exactly what I needed. When I read Empty Wheel's piece because it confirmed, I thought, some of my own suspicions about the way intelligence sharing and surveillance might be conducted under a Trump administration, a theoretical Trump administration. Thank you. And there's your tweet now saying it was Pompeo. His mother's maiden name is Mercer, for what it's worth. I did not know that. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up as well, because, of course, the Mercers are the bazillionaires whose investments made Cambridge Analytica possible, and who ran the super PACs, the pro-Trump super PACs, and who paid Steve Bannon when Steve Bannon was out in public claiming that he was working for Trump for free. Remember all of that. Lots of Mercers out there, though. That's why she says for what it's worth. Anyway, but Empty Wheel had confirmed my worry, which was, even when it was theoretical, if you are that into Vladimir Putin, and if you are that into Russian oligarchs and Russian mobsters, and you are perturbed by stupid restrictions about surveilling American citizens contained in or suggested by the Constitution of the United States, well then, why not just simply claim to be in compliance with the Constitution and get your intelligence and surveillance handed to you by third parties, especially if they aren't even American third parties. So they'll never be subject to the restraints of the Constitution, and yet you get all the information that would otherwise be unconstitutional to provide to you as the government. Simply have Russian either government or mobster sources do the monitoring for you, and oops, it ended up on my desk, and what are you going to do? All the Constitution says is that the state can't conduct it. It doesn't say it can't read it if it happens to fall onto its desk. So long as you can't connect its collection to the federal government, you got no problems, or at least far fewer, or at least grayer ones. So, so then Pompeo, in his confirmation hearings, refused to rule exactly that off the table. It actually could happen that the CIA would have all of this data brought to its attention. It just wouldn't be the one collecting it, and, maybe Russian mobsters are doing it, or maybe the Russian government is doing it. Who knows who's doing it? All I know is I have it. What kind of data? Well, in addition to certainly, all the traditional stuff, telephone eavesdropping for that matter, plus all the metadata that goes along with things, but which we are collecting anyway, because it's not text, it's metadata. Remember that whole crazy discussion? All sorts of information is being collected, and sometimes we're offering it up for free without even knowing it. All of the Cambridge Analytica data is connected to that sort of effort, that the Facebook demographics that we offer up because we're completing our, quote unquote, completing our profile. We're actually giving them the ability to do dumb stuff like target us with specific pieces of fake news based on what we've given as our answers. If you want to say, I want to target African Americans born in 1970, gosh, how do you even parse it down to that level? Well, what about if you ask everybody who uses Facebook, and everybody apparently uses Facebook, are you African American and what year were you born? And everybody says, boy, I can't wait to tell that information to some faceless I don't know what, because I'm, quote unquote, completing my profile, or taking a fun pop psychology quiz. Which character from Star Trek are you? I want to target everybody who thinks they're Uhura. What does that tell me? You see what I'm getting at? There's some weird stuff out there, and Cambridge Analytica has been taking terrific advantage of it and turning it into money. And money for Steve Bannon and Rebecca Mercer at that. And Pompeo's mom. I don't know whether that's really true, but okay. She's a Mercer. That's out there too. So, number 3 in Justin Hendricks's tweet storm. Since the election, it's emerged that Cambridge Analytica may provide services to the Trump White House, despite the conflict with Bannon. This, according to The Guardian, and the excerpt herein provided reads, Cambridge Analytica, a data company that uses personality profiling and boasts billionaire Trump backer Robert Mercer as a key investor, is in discussions about potential deals with the Trump Organization and Steve Bannon, the CEO of the campaign and now Trump's senior counselor and chief strategist, according to a conservative digital strategist familiar with Cambridge. Despite his apparent role in the talks as a representative of Trump's incoming White House team, Bannon is also on the board of Cambridge Analytica, the source said, so he's negotiating for both sides, right? Perfect. No conflicts. That's an assertion also reported elsewhere. Mercer's daughter, Rebecca, who ran a pro-Trump super PAC that plowed $2 million into digital ads and other efforts backing Trump, and Alexander Nix, chief executive of Cambridge, are playing lead roles in the talks with the Trump Organization and with Bannon, the digital source said. Wasn't Rebecca Mercer also on the transition team in some capacity? I'm not 100% positive of that, but I recall that possibly being the case. Anyway, very interesting either way. So not only are they bringing that into the White House, but they're doing so in a way that presents horrible conflict of interest issues. Tweet number 4 from Justin Hendricks. Robert Mercer's investment in Cambridge Analytica is often reported. He is a major Trump donor. His daughter is on the transition. That answers that question. This reported by the Washington Post. The excerpt included, in 2014, Bloomberg Politics detailed how that foundation and the Mercer family generally spent its money on political causes. Millions to the Media Research Center, a conservative organization that acts as a critic of news outlets. Millions to Citizens United, the conservative group best known for successfully suing to allow more political activity by corporate interests. Behind the scenes, the Mercers apparently invested in a number of other organizations too, including Cambridge Analytica, the data shop that powered Ted Cruz's primary bid and Donald Trump's in the general, and Breitbart News. And I hope somewhere in here they'll reiterate what we were saying earlier, that the Mercers also paid Steve Bannon's income while he was supposedly not taking any from the Trump campaign itself. And, of course, way back when we discussed this the first time around months ago, that the Mercers super PAC was also behind backing the Clinton Cash book, movie, and PR tour that ended up landing that story in the pages of the New York Times and forever after poisoning the coverage of Hillary Clinton, yada yada. They're doing an awful lot of vertical integration over there. Tweet number 5 from Justin Hendricks, but it's not mentioned as often that the parent company of Cambridge Analytica is actually SCL, a British firm. Here, an excerpt from Ad Age, the advertising industry insider magazine. Cambridge Analytica emerged in 2012 from British firm SCL, which is Strategic Communications Laboratories. Actually, communications, singular. Strategic Communication Laboratories. The SCL Group, where Mr. Nix, remember that name from just a minute ago, serves as director. SCL is in the business of mind bending. That's their thing, their term for it. Working with global clients, managing political campaigns, developing psychological approaches to conflict resolution, and creating what it calls behavior change campaigns for government clients and NGOs. That sounds intriguing. Tweet number 6. For 10 years, SCL's largest shareholder was Vincent Chenguiz, a British billionaire. That's spelled, by the way, Tchenguiz. Don't know how badly I mangled it, but Chenguiz. Vincent Chenguiz, a British billionaire. This from tabletmagazine.com. For 10 years, Cambridge Analytica's parent company's largest shareholder was Vincent Chenguiz, who, together with his brother Robert, is estimated to be worth £850 million. That's about $1.1 billion. Even today, a year after Chenguiz divested his shares, SCL Group Chairman Julian Wheatland, who is also one of the company's 4 directors, is a Chenguiz employee. Chenguiz used the same Guernsey holding company, British, Channel Islands, right? Guernsey, which is one of many sort of, that's the British version of offshore banking havens. Like we would use Grand Cayman or Bermuda or something like that. So Cengiz used the same Guernsey holding company, Whedon Limited, Whedon, Wheddon Limited, to invest both in Cambridge Analytica's parent company in the UK and in another privately held UK business whose largest shareholder was the Ukrainian gas middleman Dmitry Firtash. To buy a privately held business, you normally need the approval of the biggest shareholders, this article notes, who were Firtash and Raymond Asquith, who also works for Firtash. Firtash, indicted in 2014 by the United States in a complex bribery case, is under a sort of house arrest in Austria, free on $175 million bail, while the U.S. continues to attempt unsuccessfully to extradite him. He has already been stripped of some of his Ukrainian assets by prosecutors there. Tweet number 7 here from Justin Hendricks. Cengiz, who is a gambler, was arrested in 2011 for his role in the collapse of the Icelandic bank. Oh my goodness, more connections that we recognize here. Kaupthing. This from the BBC News excerpted says this. In Iceland last year, there's two pieces to this one. The writ, first issued in Iceland last year, alleges that the trusts were duped into loan and collateral agreements because the bank failed to disclose the true state of its finances. The Cengiz brothers are known as much for their socializing as their business deals. Sounds like someone else we know. Robert Cengiz dated the model Caprice, while Vincent has often spoken of his high rolling in casinos and how he won £1 million gambling on the outcome of the Euro 2004 football tournament. The brothers and their homes and yachts have regularly featured in magazines and newspapers. Sounds rather Trumpian here, right down to the dating of models. They said, yes, so the next, there were two excerpts attached to that 7th tweet. The other one here is, I guess from further down in the BBC News article. They said, we were arrested earlier this morning and are being questioned with regard to matters relating to our relationship with Kaupthing Bank. Kaupthing. I think there was Justin inserted an R where there shouldn't have been one. Instead of Kaupthing, he had written Kraupthing. So, both of us are cooperating fully with the investigation, I guess the two Cengiz brothers, and are confident that once concluded we will be cleared of any allegation of wrongdoing. They said last year an official Icelandic report into the country's financial crisis criticized the extent of Kaupthing's loans to Robert Cengiz and companies. Rules on large exposures were not followed, the report said. The brothers, through family trusts, have issued a writ against Kaupthing, claiming £1.8 billion for fraudulent misrepresentation. So a little bit of a countersuit going on there. Kaupthing was the Icelandic bank that for some reason was offering outlandishly large loans with outrageously favorable terms to some Russian folk along the way too, something we discussed a couple weeks ago. Number 8 from Hendricks. Cengiz was targeted by Britain's Serious Frauds Office, but the investigation was botched and he got off. This from the Telegraph. The excerpt reads, Vincent Cengiz has lost the latest chapter in his lengthy legal battle against those he holds responsible for the botched Serious Fraud Office investigation into his business dealings. The SFO investigated the property tycoon over his transactions with Icelandic bank Kaupthing, which later collapsed. But the probe was dropped amid revelations the SFO had obtained documents in a raid which was carried out improperly. If only they had had the Russians carry out that raid. And then number 9 in the tweet storm, Anne Marlowe, an author, you can find, and she's referenced here by Twitter handle, which is spelled as it sounds, no E in Anne. Anne Marlowe connects Cengiz to Ukraine oligarch Dmitry Firtash, whom submerging market, remember James Henry, we've had his name called before on the show, as I recall. James Henry was the one that was getting he was being vouched for when we read his work by David K. Johnston, right? So, Anne Marlowe connects Chengwiz to Ukraine oligarch Dmitry Firtash, whom James Henry connects to Manafort and Trump. How do you like that? Remember, that was the American Interest article which we read, The Curious World of Donald Trump's Private Russian Connections. Do you remember that one? And if I recall correctly, that was the publication that only lets you see one article a month. And I think we might have read that one last month. So, or else maybe this was the same one that we read last time. So I guess I can still open it. All right. So how much more? Is there more in this tweet storm? I'm going to have to open it up. Yes, here we are. Number 10. Justin Hendricks says, the British Metro reported November 9th that Chengwiz won £1.2 million after betting on a Trump victory. How do you like that? And he just has the headline included in here, and it says exactly that. So we'll move on to number 11. When Kaupthing collapsed, which he again put the R in, when Kaupthing collapsed, it was alleged the Chengwiz brothers had basically looted it before it went bankrupt. Here a link from Financial Times, which reads, in March this year, the Chengwiz brothers and 7 other people were arrested as the Serious Fraud Office extended its probe into the 2008 collapse of Kaupthing in conjunction with Icelandic prosecutors. The SFO's criminal investigation into the brothers is ongoing, a spokeswoman said on Monday. The agency is looking at whether value was extracted from the bank in the weeks leading up to its demise. Number 12. Kaupthing was backed by Russian oligarchs, made big loans to Russians before the collapse. This from thisismoney.company.uk. This is Money reporting. The SFO is looking at why some of Kaupthing's clients were able to take such large loans backed with minimal collateral and deferred interest payments. It has discovered that Kaupthing moved its operations to the UK after backing from Russian oligarchs ran dry. Despite this background, the Financial Services Authority gave the bank a license to offer deposit accounts to British savers. It still owes the UK Treasury £2.5 billion. The Icelandic report identified Robert Chengwiz as the largest debtor in Kaupthing, as well as a shareholder in Exista, an investment company that was the biggest shareholder in Kaupthing. Robert, age 50, had borrowed a staggering £1.7 billion, and the report noted the big increase in loan facilities to Chengwiz from January 2007 to October 2008 is noteworthy in light of the fact that in late 2007, many of Chengwiz's companies started going downhill. It also pointed out that the bank continued to lend him money to repay loans being demanded by other banks. Tweet number 13. So, it is possible that the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, remember them, was initially financed by Russian money passed through Iceland. Tweet number 14. Now we see reports that Trump and Putin plan to meet, possibly Trump's first foreign visit. Where are they going to meet? Have you heard the rumors? The answer is, if you believe the rumors, Reykjavik in Iceland. According to the Financial Times, the Kremlin considers a Putin-Trump summit a crucially important opportunity to set the tone to repair a relationship which, wrecked by the crises in Ukraine and Syria, it believes has badly deteriorated. The choice of Iceland evokes memories of the 1986 talks in Reykjavik, the capital, between U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that laid the foundations for a nuclear arms control treaty later that year. Very interesting. So an interesting connection there between the Russian mobsters who apparently finance so much of the Trump organization's operations and Cambridge Analytica, which underwrote or made possible so much of the success, if that's what it was, of the Trump political organization. Very interesting and weird, and everybody seems to be wrapped up in that one. So, what kind of information is it that Cambridge Analytica and their ilk, I guess, for lack of a better term, are collecting on all of us after all? Well, let's see. Ballerina Ballerina X provides us with another option for collecting all of that. Collecting psychological info through Facebook quizzes from New York Times. Yes, but found a source for you. Okay, let's see. We'll take a look at this source that she's pointing to. The Benton Foundation. The secret agenda of a Facebook quiz. Oh, okay, I see. Benton Foundation is providing me the text for that. As it happens, I have that text available here. What else did you send to me? The Trump election equation. Let's start with military-grade PsyOps with much linky goodness and more at the bottom from Medium.com, to which we frequently return. What is their piece all about? What's missing from the Trump election equation? Let's start with military-grade PsyOps. So, where shall we start? Let's go first to the New York Times piece. Mackenzie Funk is the writer here. That's a new one on me. The secret agenda of a Facebook quiz. I guess this is where all the data for the targeting comes from and ends up being part of what gets used in those dark ads. Do you panic easily? Do you often feel blue? Do you have a sharp tongue? Do you get chores done right away? Do you believe in the importance of art? If you've ever answered questions like these on one of the free personality quizzes floating around Facebook, I'm glad to say I don't believe I ever have, but only because I don't participate in Facebook at all, because I don't know why. But perhaps you have. They seem innocuous enough, don't they? If you've ever answered questions like these on the free personality quizzes floating around Facebook, you'll have learned what's known as your ocean score, how you rate according to the big 5 psychological traits of ocean. Get it? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Ocean. You may also be responsible the next time America is shocked by an election upset. Now, we're getting to things. For several years, a data firm eventually hired by the Trump campaign, Cambridge Analytica, has been using Facebook as a tool to build psychological profiles that represent some 230 million adult Americans. A spin-off of a British consulting company and sometimes defense contractor known for its counterterrorism PsyOps work in Afghanistan, the firm does so by seeding the social network with personality quizzes. Respondents, by now hundreds of thousands of us, mostly female and mostly young, but enough male and older for the firm to make inferences about others with similar behaviors and demographics, get a free look at their ocean scores. Yay, it's free. Cambridge Analytica also gets a look at their scores and, thanks to Facebook, gains access to their profiles and real names. Cambridge Analytica worked on the Leave side of the Brexit campaign. In the United States, it takes only Republicans as clients. Senator Ted Cruz in the primaries, Mr. Trump in the general election. Cambridge is reportedly backed by Robert Mercer, a hedge fund billionaire and a major Republican donor. Key board member, Stephen K. Bannon, the head of Breitbart News, who became Mr. Trump's campaign chairman and is set to be his chief strategist in the White House. In the age of Facebook, it has become far easier for campaigners or marketers to combine our online personas with our offline selves, a process that was once controversial but is now so commonplace that there's a term for it: onboarding. Cambridge Analytica says it has as many as 3,000 to 5,000 data points on each of us, be it voting histories or full-spectrum demographics, age, income, debt, hobbies, criminal histories, purchase histories, religious leanings, health concerns, gun ownership, car ownership, home ownership, from consumer data giants. No data point is very informative on its own. And by the way, before I even go on, consumer data giants, the very ones that Mike Pompeo does not rule out incorporating into a massive CIA database on everybody in America and who knows where else. No data point is very informative on its own, but profiling voters, says Cambridge Analytica, is like baking a cake. It's the sum of the ingredients, its chief executive officer, Alexander Nix, told NBC News. Because the United States lacks European-style restrictions on second or third-hand use of our data, and because our Freedom of Information laws give data brokers broad access to the intimate records kept by local and state governments, our lives are open books even without social media or personality quizzes. but that's a great way to harvest the stuff directly, fast, and for free, and without any restrictions on its use. Keeping in mind, by the way, all of this stuff, as I mentioned again, Mike Pompeo and his refusal to take these things off the table. Why isn't he taking it off the table? Part of the reason he won't be taking it off the table is the guy who tells Donald Trump who he should and shouldn't be nominating and whether he should or shouldn't be signing executive orders and what he should and shouldn't be fighting about that particular day, Steve Bannon, is on the board of a company that could provide for an enormous amount of money all of that information and the analysis of it to the CIA, another vertically integrated enterprise. Mike Pompeo, we want you to conduct a unique blend of cyber and psychological warfare at the CIA, and we know just the company who can sell you what you need in order to be able to do it. The one I'm on the board of that will pay me an enormous sum of money. And also the Mercers, who deserve an enormous sum of money for having underwritten the election of this idiot over here with the fat rump getting onto the helicopter. You see what we're doing here? Okay. Maybe it's starting to make more sense. The fact that it all happens to have been originally underwritten by a bunch of Russian oligarchs is, I guess, icing on the cake. And I know a few people who really love icing on their cakes. Okay. So where were we? Ever since the advertising executive Lester Wunderman coined the term direct marketing in 1961, just to take you back, the ability to target specific consumers with ads rather than blanketing the airwaves with mass appeals and hoping the right people will hear them has been the marketer's holy grail. What's new is the efficiency with which individually tailored digital ads can be tested and matched to our personalities. Facebook is the micro-targeter's ultimate weapon. The explosive growth of Facebook's ad business has been overshadowed by its increasing role in how we get our news, real or fake. In July, the social network posted record earnings. Quarterly sales were up 59% from the previous year, and profits almost tripled to $2.06 billion. While active users on Facebook, now 1.71 billion monthly active users, were up 15%. The real story was how much each individual user was worth. The company makes $3.82 a year from each global user, up from $2.76 a year ago, and an average of $14.34 per user in the United States, up from $9.30 a year ago. Much of this growth comes from the fact that advertisers not only have an enormous audience in Facebook, but an audience they can slice into the tranches they hope to reach. One recent advertising product on Facebook is the so-called dark post, a news feed message seen by no one aside from the users being targeted. With the help of Cambridge Analytica, Mr. Trump's digital team used dark posts to serve different ads to different potential voters, aiming to push the exact right buttons for the exact right people at the exact right times. It's amazing that they were able to do this apparently efficiently, although maybe you don't have to do it that efficiently. I guess if nobody gets to see what you're doing, then who knows whether it's efficient or not. And it only has to be, in a close election, it would only have to be marginally more efficient than not in order to make a difference that was that could tilt an election. And if you have to do it only in a couple of states, I guess, I mean, given how horribly inefficient and incompetent the transition and administration have been elsewhere, it's hard to believe that they could do this with such precision. But again, we don't know what passes for precision. It worked. Is that all? One recent product. Okay, so we have the dark post. Imagine the full capability of this kind of psychographic advertising. In future Republican campaigns, a pro-gun voter whose ocean score ranks him high on neuroticism could see storm clouds and a threat. The Democrat wants to take his guns away. A separate pro-gun voter deemed agreeable and introverted might see an ad emphasizing tradition and community values, a father and son hunting together. That is pretty powerful to think about. In this election, dark posts were used to try to suppress the African American vote, According to Bloomberg, the Trump campaign sent ads reminding certain selected black voters of Hillary Clinton's infamous super predator line. It targeted Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood. You remember reading this. With the Clinton Foundation's troubles in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. Then there was the bit about the FEC rules being unclear when it comes to Facebook posts, etc., etc. While Hillary Clinton spent more than $140 million on television spots, old media experts scoffed at Trump's lack of old media ad buys. Instead, his campaign pumped its money into digital, especially Facebook. One day in August, it flooded the social networks with 100,000 ad variations, so-called A/B testing on a biblical scale. Surely more ads than could easily be vetted by human eyes for compliance with Facebook's community standards. Another amazingly important point. Perhaps out of necessity, the Trump team was embracing a new media lesson. It didn't have to build everything from scratch. Mark Zuckerberg and others had already built the infrastructure the campaign needed to reach voters directly. When Trump TV went live on Facebook before and after the second debate, it raked in $9 million in donations in 120 minutes. In the immediate wake of Mr. Trump's surprise election, so many polls and experts were so wrong that it became fashionable to declare that big data was dead. But it isn't. Not when its most obvious avatar, Facebook, was so crucial to victory. On Monday, after a similar announcement from Google, Facebook said it would no longer allow fake news websites to show ads on their own websites from Facebook's ad network, a half step that neither blocks what appears on your news feed nor affects how advertisers can micro-target users on the same social network. There are surely more changes to come. Mr. Zuckerberg is young, still skeptical that his radiant transparency machine could be anything but a force for good, rightly wary of policing what the world's diverse citizens say and share on its network, so far mostly dismissive of Facebook's role in the election. If Mr. Zuckerberg takes seriously his oft-stated commitments to diversity and openness, he must grapple honestly with the fact that Facebook is no longer just a social network. It's an advertising medium that's now dangerously easy to weaponize. A Trump administration is unlikely to enforce transparency about who is targeted by dark posts and other hidden political ads, or to ensure that politicians take meaningful ownership of what ads say. But Facebook can. Now, having reached the end of the article, we can identify Mackenzie Funk for you. An Open Society Fellow is a founding member of the journalism cooperative DECA and the author of Windfall, The Booming Business of Global Warming. I believe a first item on that list, an Open Society Fellow, means that all Trump supporters get to dismiss the work as having been paid for by George Soros. But there you have it. Now, let's see. Wasn't there another piece that we were pointed to? Yes, Medium. Let's take a look over at that one and see what's up. Let me also just check in. Okay. Well, I can at least tell you this. We will, we'll have to arrange for yet another post moment with Josie, and I'll tell you why after we clear things up just a little bit. But I guess that gives us the opportunity to take a look over at the Medium piece and see what other bits and pieces we might learn from this one. It's a very Friday show, I think. Maybe we should just reserve Friday for those kind of deep dive things. What's missing from the Trump election equation? Let's start with military-grade psyops. This is beginning to worry me a little bit. Jonathan Albright is the author of this piece, a professor and researcher in news, journalism, and hashtags. How do you like that? Award-nominated. I'm sorry, you lost. Sorry about that, Jonathan. I didn't mean to rub it in. Award-nominated data journalist, it reads. Okay, and it says it's a 9-minute read, which is a helpful little tag to have. I never noticed that on Medium Corporation. So I'm going to probably turn a 9-minute read into 18 minutes. That'll bring us almost to the end of the show. So what about these military-grade psyops? What do Nelson Mandela, Tom Tillis, Trump's possible Secretary of State pick John Bolton, I guess this is an older article, What's the date on this one? November 11th. Yeah, well, thank God that one didn't come true. Breitbart chairman Steve Bannon, Ted Cruz, a reclusive billionaire computer scientist political donor, a quant hedge trading fund, the Brexit campaign, and Donald J. Trump have in common military-grade data firepower. Ready? Ted Cruz, is a headline here, Ted Cruz erased Trump's Iowa lead by spending millions on voter targeting. And when it's put that way, voter targeting, it seems awfully traditional and mundane, doesn't it? Everyone does that. Filings reveal Texas senator paid $3 million to profiling company as hedge fund billionaire ceded advantage in military escalation of data-powered campaign, reads the subheader. And when I say ceded, by the way, it's not C-E-D, but S-E-E-D-E-D, ceded, paid for, right? This, a piece from The Guardian. This won't be an excerpt from The Guardian, but it's, I guess that's the headline and subheader from a piece in The Guardian. Now to the article at Medium. Too many post-election Trump think pieces are trying to look through the Facebook filter peephole instead of the other way around. So, let's turn the filter inside out and see what falls out, says Jonathan Albright, author of this Medium piece. First up, boomers, the new activists. Voters have been on Facebook since 2008. The New York Times' late David Carr wrote about how the first Obama campaign famously used social media to get out the vote. I recall those days. Not so much through strategic data profiling as through focused candidate messaging and grassroots mobilization. Yet the Facebook election world has changed since 2008. It's also much different than 2012 and 2014. And now we have embedded here a Pew Internet Study chart titled, Among Politically Engaged Internet Users, Young Adults Have the Highest Level of Involvement. You can well imagine that to be the case. Today, it's older adults who have taken the place of what Pew described in 2009 as politically engaged youth on what are now mainstream social media, such as Facebook. Boomers are the new young people of social media activism. To quote Katie Rogers of the New York Times, and there's a headline here from an April 14th piece, Why do older people love Facebook? Let's ask my dad. She wrote that piece and included here. Now back to the article, I guess. To set the Trump Facebook election record straight, Trump's real momentum came in August 2016 when his son-in-law, remember that guy, Jared Kushner, introduced him to the team hired by Ted Cruz's primary super PAC, the London-based SCL Behavioral Science Group's U.S. subsidiary, Cambridge Analytica. Okay. And then embedded in here a screen grab of a National Review headline from August 2016. Trump campaign turns to psychographic data firm used by Cruz. Item number 2 here in the Medium article, Tiny Data, Big Results. The Tiny voter profiling and behavior targeting firm is having quite a run as of recent, associated with high-profile Republican Party actors during the 2014 elections, including former George W. Bush staffer John Bolton, Ted Cruz, and a win in the most expensive midterm Senate race in U.S. history in 2016 battleground North Carolina. The firm is even described in Podesta emails on WikiLeaks. How do you like that? So that's where Tom Tillman comes in. Cambridge Analytica is responsible for much of the strategic momentum in the pro-Brexit camp's data-driven Leave.eu campaign. Oh, and helping to ensure the 1994 election of Nelson Mandela, the 2004 Ukrainian Orange Revolution, haha, that's funnier than ever now, and managing campaigns for dozens of prime ministers and governments from Indonesia to Albania. How do you like that? Now embedded, by way of illustration, is a November 18th, 2015 piece from PR Week. Leave.eu campaign brings in U.S. voter data and messaging firm Cambridge Analytica. Subtitle here, one of the two campaigns working toward a British exit from the European Union, has enlisted the support of a U.S. firm whose former successes include helping Nelson Mandela to the South African presidency in 1994. Now, how did they do that prior to the existence of Facebook? Not quite sure. But apparently they've been around a while. Or at least SCL probably was doing the job then. Number 3, viral marketing. So, the Brexit success, Nelson Mandela's South African presidency, which I don't think most people would include in a list alongside Brexit and Donald Trump, but there it is. Ted Cruz's primary campaign, and Donald J. Trump's unexpected election win don't just share the common populist anti-establishment brick through the window narrative. Is that fair for Nelson Mandela? I mean, maybe. They share a behavioral science psyops firm that tried to build a psychological profile of every U.S. voter. Yikes, that sounds scary. Who said that? Well, the Washington Post did, or at least that's what the link leads to. But what about this other thing here? Here's another embedded illustration. This time a sentence lifted from, of all places, but remember, we've gone back to them a couple of times, as unbelievable as it sounds, Cracked magazine, cracked.com. David Wong's piece in this case. We'll have to watch for the language here. But to those ignored, suffering people, Donald Trump is a brick chucked through the window of the elites. Are you a-holes listening now? That does seem awfully familiar. Sadly, while I was exploring the SCL group's history, my computer blocked a Trojan PHP keylogging exploit, to be exact, on an archived version of its website. So interestingly, the archived version of the SCL group's history is a trap for introducing malware into your computers. If you wanted to check it out for yourselves, I would recommend doing so with extreme caution. And by the way, now I get worried about the fact that anybody's computers would be protected by Kaspersky, which is a Russian-owned. Okay. And now the next illustration included here is a screen grab of his infection detected notice from his antivirus program. Cambridge Analytica, according to an in-depth Bloomberg piece by Sasha Eisenbert, is funded and promoted by secretive billionaire Robert Mercer, a hedge fund manager who frequents elite political circles. Mercer is a former IBM Robert J. Watson Center researcher who worked on computer language processing before turning financier. An MSNBC piece notes his background. A born math whiz, Mercer earned his PhD in computer science at the University of Illinois and designed complicated algorithms for IBM prior to joining Renaissance. Mercer is involved with Renaissance Technologies, one of the world's most profitable quant hedge funds, which was investigated by the U.S. Senate for software-assisted, i.e. algorithmic, tax evasion practices in 2014. How do you like that? Here, an entry from Wikipedia on Renaissance Technologies reads, Renaissance is one of the first highly successful hedge funds using quantitative trading, known as quant hedge funds, that rely on powerful computers and sophisticated mathematics to guide investment strategies. In 1988, the firm established its most profitable portfolio, the Medallion Fund, which used an improved and expanded form of Leonard Baum's mathematical models, improved by algebraist is how it's, well, I don't know, I've never said the word, James Axe, to explore correlations from which they could profit. Mercer, along with his GOP megadonor daughter, was in the top 5 Republican Party contributors for the 2014 U.S. midterm elections and was the leading political donor for 2016. Next up, Oceans of Noise. Cambridge Analytica has been called out for borderline ethical use of personal Facebook data, such as covertly gathering likes to predict the attitudes and beliefs that Facebook users might share unknowingly. Other strategic information could include connected third-party application data, comments and likes on public Facebook pages, internet browsing history through Facebook's APIs and scripts, consumer loyalty programs, mobile app logins, publicly shared photos and profile information that users forget about, and, I'm presuming, more mundane tactics such as harnessing unassuming personality quizzes on Facebook that capture invaluable psychometric data people readily share with their friends and families, but not with a psychological voter profiling firm. But so what? It's out there. They can grab it. And by the way, the one that's telling you to take the Facebook quiz and serving it up to you when you ask for it and gathering the information you tell it is them. Duh. Let's see. Next embedded illustration here. That most used words Facebook quiz is a privacy nightmare. Over 16 million people have agreed to give up almost every private detail about themselves to a company they probably have no idea about or would never want to give it to, according to this little banner ad that illustrates the article. Cambridge Analytica uses it to build their OCEAN. Remember the OCEAN personality model? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. You can find a simplified version of CA's test here at this link and get to know the real you in 5 minutes. It advertises, remarked Bloomberg's Sasha Eisenberg about the quiz. Cambridge Analytica's assessment differed in one crucial way. The firm promised to tell me things I might not even know about myself. It claimed to predict where I would fall on the 5-factor personality model. All of the micro-targeting profiles of myself that I had seen, none had flattered my self-concept like this one. Well, I guess if they're expert flatterers, no wonder they ended up on the Trump payroll. Nigel Oakes, the Cambridge Analytica parent SCL Group CEO, interviewed in Eisenberg's story, came from the ad agency Saatchi & Saatchi, and argues that traditional advertising methods are, quote, incapable of affecting the type of mass opinion shifts necessary for social change. Here's Nigel's talk on the most common mistakes in designing influence campaigns at the U.S. State Department. And video of him making that presentation is herein embedded. Nigel highlighted 4 very common errors made in designing influence campaigns, especially if one is trying to induce significant behavior change. Attempting to change attitudes, not behavior. Focusing on individuals or audience segments, not groups. Using broadcast messages instead of leveraging existing motivations. And using survey methods for audience analysis instead of group diagnostics. When Trump's real strategy emerged, down to the specific words he used to double down on his controversial propositions, build a wall, and inflammatory language, for example, Crooked Hillary and Pocahontas, many of the tactics likely came from the military-grade psychometric processing of targeted potential voter data. Embedded here, Emily Crockett's piece from Vox. Why is Trump using this nickname for Warren, the Pocahontas one? Trump's comments may be racist against Native Americans, but he's using it here to sarcastically suggest that Warren really isn't Native American, which, oddly enough, proves that Trump can also be racist while trying to insult someone for being white. Very interesting. Even if this psychometric data were to be leaked to the press, it is complex in the sense that journalists and political pundits would probably not be able to readily comprehend and report on it. And much of it would be personally identifying and not ethical to report on in the first place. So how could the Fourth Estate attempt to use it to inform the general public? The question is asked. Well, let's see. Embedded next is this piece from SCL Elections page at the SCL Group's website. SCL, it says, can help you develop the flexibility and dynamism to win. What are they promising candidates? The gathering of resources and their subsequent allocation must be planned in such a way as to maximize their effectiveness. Careful preparation ensures that time and money are not wasted and that limited reserves are wisely exploited. Yada, yada, yada. You should take a look at it, of course, but let's get back to the article. Military-grade intervention is next. SCL Group's unique selling proposition is that they help ensure time and money are not wasted. At $5 a head for Trump, let's just say Cambridge Analytica's money-saving strategy worked. Embedded next, at under $5 each, Trump's votes came cheap. This is a report from Reuters. Anyway, next up, while stats hotshot blogs like 538 and the New York Times Upshot were working with big data from pre-election polls, voter bias surveys, and exit polls, all of which only mirror information that members of the public are willing to give away to someone they don't know personally. Cambridge Analytica, described as half ad agency and half hackathon, was mining the real data, finding hot-button topics that got people mad enough to get out the door and rock the vote, not unlike the Obama campaign did for Democrats in 2012. As 538's Harry Enton noted 2 days after the election, there were no purple states on November 9th. Nate Silver finally concluded at 3 o'clock in the morning, "It's the most shocking political development of my lifetime." I'm not blaming Cambridge Analytica or SCL as the culprit here. The firm offers a service, and politics have always been dirty. The company was hired to do their job, which is to win elections, overthrow governments, control social uprisings, train covert military ops teams, etc. They were paid more than $5 million by the Trump campaign in the month of September alone, not including a sizable payout from Ted Cruz's primary GOP challenge. Next up, the Trump card. The election 2016 result wasn't the fault of Facebook's algorithm, the filter bubble, or professional journalism being completely out of touch with the majority of the country, nor was it the fault of pollsters and statistics geeks who were working with enormous yet unreliable sources of data. As the Trump electoral win clearly demonstrates, the topics people discuss with their closest connections and their viewpoints they share in confidential circles trump even the biggest data sets, especially when the result involves a clear outcome. An election win from a single behavioral tactic, finding people who can be influenced enough to actually go out and vote. Stack this strategy on top of an electoral college-based system and you'll find the exact voters in the exact states you need to spend time influencing. Forget the rest. Well, actually, you'll want to make the ones who you know aren't going to vote for you angry. This way you can extract more data from people who might potentially vote for you. And of course, all while reminding your recruits that the system is rigged. Cambridge Analytica, of course, goes far beyond Facebook data and uses scholarly research, machine learning, advanced algorithms, thousands of data points, as well as targeted advertising to potentially receptive voters, through mediums like satellite-based DirecTV, whose ad tech allows for individual household profiling. Well, there's lots more, of course, but we don't have the time to bring it all to you. It's time for us to play our outro music and get the hell outro here. Pretty amazing stuff. The article continues from here on in, and like I promised, I turned a 9-minute read into a 20-minute read and still didn't get all the way through it. There's lots more for you to digest over the weekend, but it is time for us to hand the reins over to the guys on the after show who will tell you about all the things that I skipped today. Let's round it all up for you on Angle of Repose Friday for the after show. After Trump took office, the Labor Department was ordered to take down a special website that was a resource for whistleblower retaliation complaints at Wells Fargo. The Trump administration has now ordered the Department of Energy not to share science results, peer-reviewed papers, or any other work on renewable energy with the public, professional organizations, or Congress. And even though Antonin Scalia is still dead, Mike Pence says it's always been Trump's original intent to appoint a strict constructionist to the Supreme Court. On the last half, what do they got for our Friday news dump and recycling center? The woman behind the brutal lynching of Emmett Till has revealed for the first time that she fabricated the most sensational part of her testimony. And Trump is bewildered why anyone would criticize his disturbing embrace of the dangerously abrasive and arrogant racist Andrew Jackson. All of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast community calendar, and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice coming up next.
From Daily Coast Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, it was an awful lot. I'm sorry I couldn't cram it in all the way. Oh, and one more tweet I wanted to share with you. Ryan Grimm from Huffington Post had a funny one the other day. A great way of making, he said, Democrats back the wall. How could you make it do it and have Mexico pay? Build it out of solar panels and windmills and make them buy the energy. What do you think of that?